Well, wait a minute. We're missing a panelist. Can you tell?
Leading the way, shining bright like the healing rays. 420 patients, we stand as one. Safe access for everyone. Oh, we rise up, lifted higher. Medicine fueled by love and fire. Together we blaze, together we laugh. Patients for safe access. That's
The following production has been brought to you by the Hippie Broadcasting Network, WTHC Radio, and Stoner Records. Now, here's your host, Summer Parker.
Welcome, everybody. Hello. Good evening, everybody, and welcome here tonight in person and online. Thank you so much for joining us for an important conversation where we're going to discuss the future of Oklahoma's medical marijuana program. My name is Dr. Marion McNabb. I'm the president of the Cannabis Center of Excellence and a public health doctor, the principal investigator of the 2026 Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Patient and Business Research Studies, together with colleagues here at the table. Over the past several months, we've joined together directly with Oklahoma patients, businesses, healthcare professionals, advocates, and business owners to better understand what's working well within Oklahoma's program and what we can improve. Tonight's event brings together national and local leaders here in the cannabis industry, where we're going to be discussing patient access, public health, policy, research, and the future of medical cannabis here in Oklahoma. And beyond. So we're honored to have some guests here in person here in Oklahoma City, and we are live streaming this online. And right before we begin, I'd like to introduce our very special guest, Steph Sherer from Americans for Safe Access.
From Washington, D.C.
All the way from Washington, D.C. It's truly an honor to welcome one of the most influential leaders in the United States in the medical cannabis movement here. For more than 2 decades, Steph has been a driving force behind the patient advocacy, medical cannabis policy reform, and the advancement of patient rights across the United States and internationally. Steph is the founder and executive director of Americans for Safe Access, the nation's largest organization dedicated to ensuring safe and legal access to cannabis for therapeutic use and research. Since founding Americans for Safe Access in 2002, Steph has helped shape medical cannabis policy in nearly every state that has adopted medical cannabis legislation. Her work has influenced lawmakers, regulators, healthcare professionals, researchers, and patient advocates around the world. Under her leadership, Americans for Safe Access has developed groundbreaking programs focused on patient education, healthcare provider training, standards, product safety, and government accountability. She's worked directly with members of Congress, federal agencies, state agencies, healthcare organizations to promote evidence-based practices. And we're really excited and honored to have her here tonight as we grow in Oklahoma as one of the largest programs here in the United States. So please join me in welcoming Steph. Really excited to kick off this panel tonight, and I want to go ahead and let our other panelists introduce themselves before we kick off our questions.
All right, well, you guys know me, the hostess with the mostest of Patients for Safe Access podcast, Summer Parker, and if you don't, well, you do now. So, I'm a little cheeky always, love it though. I am also the co-founder of Patients for Safe Access of Oklahoma, which if you can't tell was a kind of a wordplay off of Americans for Safe Access. I met Steph in 2023 at a Validated Voices Summit in Washington, D.C. Loved the movement for the access to medical cannabis. Wanted to expand that further to the access to safe medical cannabis. So that's what we're about.
Kadi Nail, nurse practitioner here in Oklahoma with a pharmaceutical degree in cannabis science and therapeutics. really advocating for the public health, patient safety, safe access, provider education, all levels of education on cannabis, and research as Oklahoma should be setting the gold standard.
Absolutely. Second that.
I'm Steph Davis. I'm a cannabis law paralegal. Been doing this for about 11 years now across multiple states. So it has been an interesting ride, and I am excited to talk about how DEA rescheduling is going to thrust us into the future.
Awesome.
And
The
hear
future
how-
is now.
It is. And that's a great segue. So for Steph, for more than 2 decades, you've been leading this work. Can you briefly share what inspired you to found Americans for Safe Access and what you see as your organization's greatest accomplishments over the past 20 years?
Well, I am a medical cannabis patient. I have a dystonia, which took my doctors forever to diagnose, of course. But it was clear I had a severe inflammation issue. And about 6 months into treatments for that, my kidneys started failing. Which was really scary. I was 23, and my neurologist one day closed the door behind him. And he asked me if I smoked pot. I was this little old man with like a red toupee. He never closed the door in his office ever. And I just kind of looked at him and I asked him if I was his youngest patient because I thought he was trying to score weed from me. I was like, what is happening? It was like in 2000. I was like, he's like, no. He said, look, I don't know anything about this. This was in San Diego, California. He said, I know there's some law or something. He said, but I have 2 patients that have an intolerance to anti-inflammatories. They told me that they are using cannabis. We're out of options at this point. So for me, it meant stop taking the anti-inflammatories, which after 72 hours, start becoming fetal, or keep taking them and go on dialysis in 6 months. Or ask all my friends if they smoke weed. So I was in my early 20s in San Diego, and I think I started with my friends to listen to reggae. And I was like, you smoke weed, right? And so they let me use their stash, whatever, and it worked. Worked really well. And then they were like, okay, you have to leave now. And they gave me their dealers' numbers, right? And I didn't have any like scary experiences getting cannabis, but I had some embarrassing ones, like was in a suit because I just come from a press conference, and the skater guy that was buying cannabis from in a Walgreens parking lot thought I was a cop and wouldn't sell me, and I'm like crying to the skater, I'm like, ah! Like this is horrible, I cannot do this. So friends of mine had told me about these dispensaries in the Bay Area of California, and I went to visit one. And I didn't really understand that this was illegal federally, right? Like I used a credit card. There was a sign, and you drive to the parking lot. And I learned more about cannabis in that 45-minute visit than I even knew was possible. In fact, first time someone showed me a bud, I was from Texas. I thought cannabis was brown. And someone showed me a bud, and I was like, that's not cannabis. Cannabis is brown. That's something from Dr. Seuss.
And fly.
Exactly. But I also left the dispensary with like 2 months worth of cannabis and went back down to San Diego, had a similar experience. So I decided, I had a consulting business to move up there. I was there for a couple months, and there was a federal raid on a cultivation site in Oakland. Ed Rosenthal is that read. And I was like, oh, wait. And I realized that these individuals were committing federal civil disobediences to provide patients medicine. And I had a background in politics, direct action politics. I've been arrested several times, but for like incommoding, right? Like blocking an entrance, not 40 years mandatory minimums. So I realized that I printed up a sentencing chart for cannabis, like big, and I went to, there were only 11 dispensaries at the time, and I walked in there with this chart. I was like, you realize like this is what you're doing, right? And yes, like if you are really willing to commit a civil disobedience like this, I will build a movement to protect you. And again, I thought it was going to take 2 years because we had 80% support nationwide. But on the criminal justice side of things, really the war on drugs is set up so that it's just a machine, right? 98% of people plead guilty. There's a lot of asset forfeiture. It's just like it's like a racist bank for cops, right? And so what was always needed was someone to say not guilty, right? And so that's what I was like, oh my God, yes, please let me build this. So Asa Hutchinson was head of the DEA at the time. That's where we got our name. Because I thought we were starting a campaign. So we're Asa versus Asa. That's why people say Asa instead of ASA. And we just wanted to make some noise around the raids so that people understood that they were happening. And slowly I started realizing like how much hadn't been thought out about medical cannabis movement, that really the 8 laws that had passed were just criminal exemption laws, which meant if you got arrested, you could show a letter from a doctor to the judge and they would drop the charges, but you couldn't get back your medicine. It wasn't arrest protection. And so I also realized not everybody has a friend in their 20s that listens to reggae. And there was no access infrastructure really. And so we created this raid alert plan. Back then it was before texting, so we had a phone tree. And so everybody knew in the dispensaries to call my cell phone, and I would call the first 10 people, they would call 10 people, call the press, and make sure that there was a protest happening while the DEA was there. And we did that emergency response plan 323 times. It was a lot, but we also found out that it wasn't just the federal police that people were worried about. Actually, in the state of California, people were calling us, and in Colorado and in Maine, that we are not worried about the feds. Like the local police are arresting us. And so, we started creating a strategy. It was like, oh, I just assumed the people that passed those laws were implementing them. I made an ass out of somebody. Maybe it was me. But realized that somebody needed to do that work. And so we started building up a strategic plan within the state. And then I also realized that the year before I started ASA in 2001, the DEA put out a denial petition for rescheduling. And I didn't come from a cannabis space. I didn't know any cannabis activists before this. I kept hearing from these new colleagues that the DEA had put out this propaganda document. And I was like, are you guys talking about the same thing? Like, is this the denial petition? Because the way I read it was as a blueprint. Because what it said, the reason that they couldn't reschedule cannabis was that there were no product safety protocols for the supply chain, that you couldn't identify the constituent components, and that cannabis was Schedule 1 in our drug treaties. And so Americans for Safe Access, our strategy from the beginning was, let's utilize the states, which that's where most of the arrests happen for cannabis, and create a safe harbor for patients to have access. Let's make sure we can test that product. Although that's been an interesting journey with them. And let's just make sure that people aren't being harmed while we take these really big things that the DEA has put in front of us. So my strategy, or my passion of this was that there are a lot of really sick people who aren't having access to this medicine because nobody's gone through the steps to make sure they can have it. And yes, there's propaganda. Yes, this has been been used as a racist tool. But a lot of things have been used as racist tools in our society. But the reality is that nobody was actually doing the work, like writing the product safety protocols, right? Like rolling it. It's boring as hell. Right. We partnered with the American Herbal Products Association. It took us 4 years to create product safety protocols. And it was 4 years of consensus meetings. Wow. We had 176 companies involved.
Wow.
It was, yeah.
This is an incredible amount of 25 years now.
Yeah. 24.
And so back from, and now Schedule 1 at the time when you started. We are now, fast forward in 2026, we have some new news of federal rescheduling. We'll start us off here. We've got a lot of questions we want to cover tonight. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what, to tell the audience about what first just happened around federal rescheduling of cannabis, and then we'll dive into a little bit of Oklahoma.
And we're not a hard set timeline to
Yeah.
shut off at 8, as long as you're good, we're good.
Yeah.
I brought my sleeping bag.
Our sleeping bag. I'll bring mine.
Yeah, so enlighten the audience of what just happened.
Yeah, you guys can also, so I tend to speak in footnotes, so you can also be like, we don't need that much information. So what just happened was our strategy has been working. So through the state programs to serve patients, we were able to demonstrate accepted medical use, which that was one of the #1 reasons why cannabis can be rescheduled. And through a 15-year process that included creating an international patients coalition with 47 countries, we changed the scheduling of cannabis in the UN treaties. And so, but December 2020 is when that happened. And under the Controlled Substance Act, there's this clause that's really been used like once, USC 811D, that allows the Attorney General in certain circumstances to act without this big rescheduling process or without Congress, which are the only two ways you can reschedule a medicine. And so because we changed the scheduling in the UN drug treaty, the US scheduling was out of whack. And so usually attorney generals do this the other way. Like there's a new chemical that people have found, they're getting high, some new version of bath salt. And so the US, we adjust our scheduling to make sure that is on the scheduling. But it could go either way. And so this is actually, I think, the first time it's been used to change the scheduling for medical cannabis. So we had that authority under the UN drug treaties. And then the other authority that the Attorney General has is that there's an obligation to make sure that there is enforcement along the supply chain. And so what the Attorney General said is like, okay, look, there is a process in the states that, they're monitoring it, doctors are involved, there's a process it's different from prescriptions, but it's working, right? And so we're going to open up the DEA licensing and have all of those licensed businesses get DEA licenses. And so what they also said was that our certifications, our recommendation from your doctor is now equivalent to a prescription. Sorry. So I don't think it will talk like
It's
public
very
health
important to
does.
know. It's very important for patients to know.
But what that prescription means is that you have protections under the American Disabilities Act.
Yeah.
You have protections under the Fair Housing Act. You have protections under 503 of the Rehabilitation Act, which means hospitals have to accommodate you.
Yes.
Right? Like no more telling someone they can't die the way they want to. Like they actually have to accommodate you. Like, and so I'm just thinking of all these people I know that died of horror, like not the death they wanted, or people who got kicked out of their housing or lost their jobs.
In our study recently, we asked patients if they got removed out of healthcare, and 5% of patients in Oklahoma work because of their medical cannabis use. And so now they don't have to be, which is amazing.
We just have a burning of pain contracts.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And now we see that the VA is moving more into being able to
Yeah, I
recognize
think-
cannabis.
Yeah.
Well, she's how I learned the Department of Justice gave an acceptable medical value to cannabis. And that was one of the things that I brought back here and legalized a lot in conversations.
Yeah,
The federal government also owns patents right now.
it's true. But I think one of the really exciting things about rescheduling here is that Oklahoma has one of the largest patient per capita populations in the United States. So there's over 311,000 medical cannabis patients in the state. 1 out of 13 people, and more dispensaries, more cultivators and access, and manufacturers here. So it's really exciting. And as one of the largest medical programs, we had a question from your perspective, from your national perspective. How would you really look at the current state of Oklahoma's medical marijuana program in light of this new scheduling, and just from a patient perspective?
So I think that there's a few steps that are going to happen, right? So the changing of the scheduling and the putting creating a pathway for state licenses to get the DEA licenses. That's step one. And unfortunately, the Attorney General is not authorized to do anything else, right? So this is really where federal legislation has to come into play, because it's unclear now what happens, right? Because if you have a DEA license, what is the Oklahoma regulators, right? Like, you have to go to them first and then go to the DEA. All of those are sort of the big question marks, and our federal legislation, the Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Act, has already anticipated all of that, and I think now's the time to ask Congress to do that. I think that there are, so in Oklahoma, you guys actually took our model legislation and just passed it, this state and West Virginia. Like, really, there were no amendments. We're like, okay. But we literally put everything we wanted in there. We're like, okay, cool.
Which makes it an awesome, unique state.
Yes.
Which makes it a very unique state.
But what they didn't do, is they didn't go. They really didn't move forward with the regulatory part. So we do it. So we're like, no, not everyone can do that, right? So you had licenses out there because the regulation piece wasn't happening. Someone in the state was like, but we get money if you apply. So it was just this cha-ching. They just took application after application. I mean, it was crazy. Exactly. Somebody got
Actually, it was more like,
exactly. So I think that what people should be thinking about in the future of medical cannabis is, in the short term, you're still going to have to think about your state, but we need to be thinking about a national level, right? And so if Oklahoma could get behind the program, if your state legislature, the governor could be proud of it, Oklahoma could really be a leader and actually could be supplying a lot of states that just don't want to cultivate cannabis, that just don't want to manufacture it. So we actually have a guidance document. We had a guidance document that we put out yesterday for states that's more about getting rid of actually asking them to expunge all cannabis convictions, because that's one of the things that can keep you from getting a federal license.
Okay.
But I think
that's really important to know for social equity programs.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we have to ask for it. And I will say this: there's a deadline that people are worried about. It's coming up very quickly on June 26th for people to apply for the DEA registration. And people are like, oh, I'll wait till maybe the next time. And I would just say, apply, because it's a fast track, right? Because the administrator has been told that he must give you the registration under this guidance right now. You must, unless you have a drug conviction for cannabis. It's like, what are you going to be skimming off the side? I don't know. But and we are lobbying the Department of Justice. We are lobbying Congress. We're trying to get an amendment added to the Department of Justice budget, saying that they can't apply that. So there's going to be lots of ways to do it, right? And so even if you do have a drug conviction, you should still apply for the application, because a lot can happen between now and 6 months. We can still get that. But if you don't apply now, then you're going to go through the registration process that just takes forever, right? And so you can still apply on June 27th. It's just they could wait 3 years, and that's what it took the 8 or 7 cannabis licensees. So this is a fast track. They're not calling and asking your neighbors. They're like, great, you have this license, so go get it. But I think Oklahoma and a few other states really have the potential to be the big winners. But again, your state really has to be excited about that. So the order did not create interstate commerce. Like that is, interstate commerce is still illegal unless a state passes a law saying that they want it.
Okay.
So if Oklahoma, if you guys pass in the legislature that says, you guys could just be like, yeah, we're gonna export but no import, go for it. Kind of making it up as you go. At least in the short term, those states can work. You're gonna have to make sure, and this is the big hard part for Oklahoma, that you gotta get your product safety protocols in place, because arguably, I don't even know if people who have applied, who get the license, right, the first license, I don't know if they would be able to keep them because of the condition of your product safety standards.
Yeah.
And so if you're confused by any of this, it's because it's really confusing, right? So,
And we'll be providing links to all the guidance documents.
and I have presentations with lots of pictures. You guys can look out. I have a coloring book. It's a good idea, actually.
Did crayons?
I have a musical coming out. The regulatory guidance that the Attorney General is using is under the UN and under WHO, right? And so WHO has very, very clear product safety guidances, right? And if you guys have seen the patient focused certification, our standards, there were the first ISO 1765 standards. Those are accepted all over the world. And so every state has to just adopt those. One of the challenges of doing this state by state, you guys all know, is that cannabis businesses have really impacted the regulations, which is not unusual for any, like that part isn't weird. It's just hard because what we are doing is we're skipping steps to get a medicine to a patient, meaning like we're not going through the FDA. And so by not going to the FDA, there has to be something else, right? And so our what we have learned through our product safety programs when they work in the states, they're better than the FDA, right? Because we're on top of it, we're at the source. I hope we keep that as we turn into a national program. I think this is really the gateway to other herbal medicines, because we've figured out how to mass produce and mass distribute botanical medicines. Right? That's amazing. Except for you guys. You guys haven't figured it out yet. But if Oklahoma figures it out,
I know. To your point, I mean, lab testing and lab quality is a huge issue in Oklahoma, and I think this is a very important point for businesses to understand that there are going to be these really strict standards, to be following that are, and applying not only.
but this also could be something like a point where you guys could get. I always want to call them OB/GN, but it's not.
OBN.
OB&D. Yeah, so OB&D is required.
I hope you're not lying,
Yeah.
Mr. Woodward.
So OB&DD has required all businesses in Oklahoma to register with the DEA. So earlier this month, OMA has issued confusing guidance saying that they, and businesses have been confused. So this is actually one of the major kind of issues. So OB&DD came out right after OMA had said this confusing guidance to say now that they're required.
Yeah, I think the fact that there has been a lack of enforcement, especially in adult use, makes everyone think that everything looks legal, right? But right now, except for medical cannabis from a registered state program, is illegal. Everything else is illegal. And it will be, if cannabis is rescheduled, Schedule 3, through this hearing that's happening, all of the other cannabis, except for DEA registered cannabis, will still be illegal, right? Like you have to be regulated to be legal. An example I always tell people is like codeine 3, purple drink, right? Like they're getting that codeine outside of a regulated system. And trust me, there are not people deducting their business expenses from Jolly Ranchers running around off the piece. But I think that Oklahoma is a very important state, not just because I was born here. Trivia.
Yeah.
St. Francis,
That's good.
the Peak Hospital. But because of the amount of cannabis that is here, but also the amount of weigh-in that your narcotics officers interact with the DEA. Say Oklahoma and Tennessee, like they show up at every hearing. They're like literally always in DC. It's like, it does weigh the drug problem. You're always here. But just kidding.
You really have to go.
I mean, they know it. But the fact that they came out and made that proclamation that said that you have to apply, I think that is very telling for the country, right? Because there's all sorts of enforcement that could happen at any time. So adult use, if tomorrow Trump said get rid of it, they can get rid of it. Like they can go in, and I don't think they're gonna need to do raids again. So in the time of medical cannabis, the attacks that we had for against dispensaries and cultivation sites, they were carried out with like paramilitary style raids. That's why we had our raid response. Well, a raid is it's really just the serving of a search warrant. There's something called dynamic entry, and so you don't flush away the evidence. I'm like, yeah, they're going to get rid of 100 pounds of weed before you get. So good thing you have your guns. But a raid, that's all they're doing. They're there to get evidence so that they can indict someone. That's all we're is. So for the adult use companies who have advertising and to pay taxes or other, like they don't need any more evidence to indict them, right? Like a third grade class could indict the adult use pay, right? So they can just say close down. And then there's other tactics like asset forfeiture. They can, under the RAVE Act, they can just contact their landlords and say, we're taking your place if you don't kick them out. So this can all be done cheaply. You don't need like a bunch of extra cops, although we have a bunch now. Thank you guys. So what I find fascinating about that guidance that I'm gonna just keep saying what you might do.
OBNDD. Is this Texas? Office of Bureau of Narcotics.
I know the acronym, but it's a Texas thing. I was raised in Texas, where you actually like mispronounce your enemies' names, but you don't even know it. It's
Charles used to call them OBDNN. Like it was, and I would correct him, and it took like 3 years before I think I actually heard him say it correctly. And I was like,
well, they've also helped start a RICO cannabis task force.
Yes.
That's coming from Oklahoma from the Chinese illegal grows that are funding the Communist Party of China. And in Maine also, this is another place that that's being funded. But as far as applying, I think that what we're probably going to see in the near future is enforcement for people that are not registered. So when they make the announcement probably in December, right, of who gets those licenses, I think they're going to deem everything else illegal.
That's really important to know, and that's very important for anybody who is operating to know.
And it also coincides, coincidentally, with the timing of the email that the OBNDD put out. They said that they are going to start enforcing basically revocation administrative hearings January 1st of 2027.
Yeah.
So that falls right after the designation of who's going to be registered. And then if you do not have a DEA registration at that time, January 1st, they are going to start doing large dockets of revocation petitions. And we've seen it here before, just like COOs, they can do 1,000 cases at a time. Okay, James Hutchison is dedicated to his job.
That's a big rubber stamp.
Yeah, that's a big fear among small businesses who are very small here, who don't really know what to do, and that's kind of why we're hosting this event, to kind of provide more guidance to small businesses.
So next week, I would just say we're going to be, ACE is going to be hosting a series of how to apply, just very simple educational components. Some people want me to charge for it. I'm not going to charge for it. I mean, it is kind of annoying that lawyers and consultants just like watch my stuff and then go charge people for it. But it's a pretty simple application, but I understand why it made you nervous. But look, it's scary to talk to the DEA, but medicine is partially regulated by the DEA. We want like that, that is like
Yeah, it's a win.
it's like being around, and maybe this is just for patients who our medicine has been illegal. I mean, I've been a criminal for 25 years until April 27th, and honestly, it does feel different. I started speeding when I'm driving now, but I do think that that we just have a different mindset, right? Like the DEA, they are our regulators now. Our medicine is legal, right? And we just have to turn that around. That's now who is going to be helping distribute cannabis.
And is there going to be there's still this gray area, we're still looking for guidance and conflict between state and federal guidance. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
we're,
You're not
we
going
know
to see,
here.
you're not going to see anything from, I don't think, from the Attorney General, because there's also several lawsuits that have been filed by like SAM and
Couple of states.
a couple states. And I think that people just don't understand the federal and international laws. They're pretty solid. But your lawyer always says, like, don't say anything else if you're being sued, right? So I don't think we're going to see any guidance. There have been rumors that there's going to be an extension. There's not an extension, I don't think, because it was made through an order. And so although it may seem like a simple thing when like you see an order from the Department of Justice, it is not a simple process. And there's a lot of other things besides cannabis going on right now in Washington. So
When are you planning on doing that video?
sometime next week.
So switching gears a little bit.
Yes, so, and with us being in Oklahoma, all of us are kind of in the thick of it, I guess, as you would say. So let's have some outside eyes and perspective here. What do you believe that Oklahoma has done particularly well compared to other medical cannabis states?
Listen to Asa.
All right.
No, I mean, I think that what I think is a testament for seeing like in using the model legislation, we really kept law enforcement in a certain area and not in the medical side, right? And so there were cops sitting on task force to decide what conditions, right? Like we really were like, okay, yes, like you can watch the cannabis go through the supply chain. That's a good place for you, but like you're not going to sit there and tell us if we can give it to cancer patients, right? And so I think it's been interesting watching that unfold. I think that the communication from like patients to the regulators has been one of the most vocal. Like honestly, not just her, but but the fact that like the patients are like, hey, that's unfair, that isn't right, and actually doing something about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is pretty exciting to see, to write down everything you hope should be in a program, and someone picks it up and passes it. You're like, oh my God, right? Okay. So, but the implementation is a whole other story.
So that being said, with Oklahoma the way that it is now, where do you believe Oklahoma has the greatest opportunity for improvement over the next 5 years?
You just are trying to get me to say it's okay, aren't you? It's okay.
No,
It's on your license plate, okay?
Areas for room of improvement.
I was taking a bad. So trying to do a lot of listening right now and traveling around and learning from this process, because I think in the short term, I think that Oklahoma is going to have to pass some product safety cleanup, like this, like emergency legislation, so that when the DEA licenses come out in December, you guys get to keep them. Like I really think it's not safe. And so that's the short term. I think what the future looks like is that we're now moving out of a state by state strategy. Like medical cannabis is federally legal, which means we get the infrastructure of this country. It means we don't need special banks. It means we don't need special labs. We have special labs that can teach the other labs how to do this, right? But like all labs who have Schedule 3 licenses are going to be able to test cannabis. They probably can't do it as good as some people we know in this room. But there's, like, we're not outside anymore, right? And so this is, and every day I'm like, oh my God, nesting. Like, I can go to Disneyland. Not really, that's not on my list. But you know, when you think of like things that just not been possible, like that are now changing. And so to answer your question, I'm not sure. What I'm trying to figure out is where we spend our energy now. What do we need to clean up in Oklahoma versus like, let's just pass this federal legislation now and Oklahoma's cleaned up. So and that's, and it's hard because I have spent 24 years working state by state strategies, right? And every state is different, and we've had to pass these laws depending on the political landscape, right? One of my biggest pet peeves is when somebody like just shows up in cannabis and is like, oh, this is all a mess. And I'm like, yeah, it's a mess. Like we did this entire thing under prohibition, right? And like every state law, there was literally more law enforcement at the table than patients or doctors for everything. And we still have been selling how much cannabis? Like this is the biggest federal civil disobedience ever, right?
Yeah.
Like drug weed every year, right?
Yes.
But so there's like some of the reckoning right up there, right? And there are some things that I've been thinking a lot about. It's like, what do I want to keep from these programs, right? And what we have learned is that there is a square peg round hole when it comes to cannabis and FDA. So we kind of want to keep FDA out of this for a while. They'll have their role later. But this is something new that has not been a medicine in our country. This is a plant that you literally, there's not very many plants that are medicinal that you like trim it and dry it and it's medicine, right? Like 80% of your pharmaceuticals in the United States in your drug cabinet, they came from a plant compound, right? But you can't put a pill in the ground and be like, I want more of that, right? But we're actually going to be, if we can do this and if we can focus and spend less time maybe thinking about taxes and spend more time thinking about medicine and the infrastructure of medicine, then we are going to change healthcare in the United States. We're going to change the definition of medicine, right? We're going to get out of crisis medicine and get into whole person medicine, right? Like that's what we're building. That's the exciting part. But I think most of, this is how I see it. I know your folks can see, but this is the history of cannabis that I see. And I'll give you the slide so you can put it on there.
It's from 1804.
Right,
Timeline.
but most people talk about the history of medical cannabis, and they talk about the CSA. They talk about the prohibition, right? They talk about law enforcement, and that is one reason. Definitely, it's definitely a major contributor of why we haven't had access to cannabis. But there's also the fact that cannabis is crazy complex, right? And the tools that science has had to understand cannabis haven't been there until literally like 2012 was the first time that they were able to really break down through targeted and untargeted analysis. Okay, I don't want to get too tricky, but like the reason we have these, they call them magic bullets or single compound drugs, isn't, I mean, yes, it just turns out you can patent them, but that's not why they came up with it. It was literally because their tools, they couldn't see more than that. They're like, take this and let me see what happens. Like that is the bluntness of science. So to really understand the future of medical cannabis, you have to take, yes, the drug policy timeline, but you have to weave that with scientific discovery, right? Drug development, and how botanical medicines were treated in this country. Right? And I think that we're at this point that may not go well. Right? This is like my big fear. Everyone's like, didn't you just win? I'm like, no. There's a lot of analogies. Everybody probably has this poster in their dentist's office about like getting the ball up the hill or moving the stone up the hill. But nobody talks about what happens if you get up there. Right? And that is the scariest part. We're up there. Like we have made it to the top. Like literally our strategic plan to get, we did it. Like, and I really want to celebrate, except for I don't know if we're going to control it on the other way down.
And it's going to be very interesting right here because of the way that our government currently is not, like the current administration is not in so much support of our program when it really could be.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a good segue into the next round of questions because our recent Oklahoma patient study found that nearly 60% of patients do not believe that our elected officials support our medical cannabis patients. So what can Oklahoma leaders do to rebuild that trust and ensure that our patients have a meaningful voice in the future policy decisions?
I think this is really where we don't really have an etch-a-sketch, right? Like it would be great to be like, okay, let's talk about medicine now, right? Because people have seen like all sorts of crazy shit. But what we can do is we can have conversations that are open and people don't go to jail, right? So we can say like, and what I mean by that is, we've been dancing, our ACE has been dancing around product safety since we started the organization, right? And cannabis businesses loved us when we were trying to stop the federal rates to make sure every patient knew about us and like that we were there in existence. As soon as we passed the CDS amendment and the rates stopped, they're like, oh wait, are they talking about product safety? Like, X that, right? So I think that, explain this, we don't have to all be one anymore, right? We can be like, yeah, no, that's cannabis businesses. That is different. Like, let me tell you about what patients want. Mm-hmm. You're saying like we don't actually have to all like wait for like Tweedledum to cross the street so we can have the conversation. We can say, yeah, cannabis that is not standardized is not medicine. That's what we're working towards. That's what we should be working towards. It doesn't mean you should arrest them. It doesn't mean that we can't have this medicine now because it's better than nothing. But we get to talk about the future. And I think the best way to get medical professionals and health, public health officials is to talk about the problems with as in the context of the future, right? Because you don't have to get anything else from your state officials, really, right? After very soon, and so you can actually go in and be like, these are actually the issues that are facing patients, right? We don't have to ask for permission anymore in a way, like we're not begging in our state work anymore, right? We now are going into hospices and being like, would you like me to teach you how to integrate cannabis into there? Like, oh, we're not going to do that. I was like, do you want to get sued, right? I'd rather not sue people, but a big part of
the protections are ADA protections.
So that's also how we got to this point, right? Is that like I mentioned before, when I first started American Safe Access, they were just those criminal exemption laws, and all those people were calling us and saying like, no one's implementing the state law. We had to sue everybody. Like, we sued the California Highway Patrol, we sued the DMV, we sued cities, we sued counties, we sued companies, and we won. And that's like, actually, suing and winning the CHP was pretty awesome, I would say. But we won attorney's fees, and that like paid for the next what? And then we won so many suits that we were out of lawsuits. And what that did is that when we then went to introduce legislation in another state, and they looked at the language about police and arrest protections, they're like, oh, I don't want to put that in there. And I'm like, yeah, want to pay us? And I go, put it in there, right? So I think that we are now in an implementation cycle, right? Which means that we're going to be suing people. Which, we have an end medical cannabis patient discrimination campaign that started August 28th, the day after, right? It was published. And so we have to report that discrimination. We have tools. We wrote a letter that patients can hand to their employers, to their hospice providers, to their hospital that says, I am a federally legal medical cannabis patient. You have to accommodate me. We can talk about what that looks like. But if you're telling me I can't use medical cannabis, write it down. You have to tell me why you're not going to accommodate me. And I mean, our courts are crazy now, but that's how you do it, right? We impact litigation. But now we get to do it as a whole country.
I was about to say,
Right?
and you just produced some guidance that talks about all the protections that we now have as a result of this. So housing protections.
He has the link up there right now, the guidance document.
Okay, perfect. So
And state courts have on multiple occasions told the cannabis industry that they don't want to touch their cases because it's federally illegal. I don't want to set precedent. I don't have anything to do with this. And so now we're going to start seeing case law being set and precedent being set. And as she said, she's already set case law, right? It's not primary because it didn't happen in Oklahoma, but Oklahoma courts are going to consider every piece of legislation that.
But it's not your state courts.
But what
We're going to federal court.
I hear you, but that's what I'm saying. You
Yeah.
get to bypass them and
Yep.
say, this is no longer your excuse. And I'm
Exactly.
super excited for our
For
future.
the whole country.
Right.
The whole
And
country.
so if we could synthesize 3 top priorities for Oklahoma's program, just 1, 2, and 3, what would you say those are?
Number one, get your product safety stuff in order, like pronto. Secondly, I would say get education out to your licensees that's accurate, and to patients and to medical professionals. We actually, in that guidance document, is like this under the screen.
yeah, you can see the guidance document.
Sorry, I've never done a TikTok video. They're always like, we need, all patients need to know what their rights are. Every business that has a state license needs to understand the benefits that this brings to them, like 280E. They're legal businesses. Like, who cares about 280E? Like, whatever. That's one piece. But you get to go into a bank and be like, take my money, right? End of story, right? I'm not giving you 20x. No. Right. Legal business, right?
Yeah, I'm not giving you 5%.
It's going to be a huge relief for the businesses. So if folks don't know, 280E is tax deductions, and so now businesses will be able to deduct their taxes, which is going to be a huge boost to the businesses.
And number three, what's number 3? Okay. Number 3. Is you guys need to start reporting problems, right? And not just keeping notes or just call the regulatory agency, we have a problem. No, put it somewhere where everyone can see it, right? We have a registry for you can report discrimination. It's this very long questionnaire, but for housing, employment, accommodations, like you're at a hotel, people are rude to you, ADA, right? So, but encourage other people to report, right? We have to, it's like we're tour guides to the future. You're like, no, that's not illegal, right? And it's, literally every time you're planning something, it takes a minute, right? To really realize what it means to not be a criminal in your country.
I think one thing that makes it difficult. Reporting is great in all that aspect. And there's a lot of talk around business cultivation, but a lot of patients, probably mid-40s and older, have been forgotten about. They're looking for the professional education and looking for the provider's guidance because they are on this list of meds. And their goal is to reduce, incorporate, or in your mid-40s, they're saying, what do I do now supplement-wise to prevent going on that med? And I feel like the patients don't know who to go to.
Yeah. And that leads me into a question that I just wrote down is what is the implication for this for healthcare providers? What do they need to know right now? What are healthcare providers in Oklahoma? What are the top 3 things they should know?
So one is they should know is that they have federal protections that were part of the Research Act that we passed in 2022. For some reason, people didn't talk about that bill, but it was like a comprehensive medical cannabis bill. But one of the things that we got in there was protections for medical professionals. They cannot lose their licenses. The second thing is that I know doctors think a lot, probably more about litigation sometimes than about medicine. It's actually in our med schools. But I think that they need to know that it's okay to learn, right? It's okay to learn. There's no liability here. And for right now, we don't have just like 2 companies that they're gonna write a prescription. Like they gotta get out of their heads and learn something right now. Right? Like that's what I think they're saying. And I think that when insurance companies start jumping on board, we're gonna see them learn because they get points, blah blah blah. But there's a lot we have to do before insurance companies are gonna jump on board.
I wonder if TRICARE will be kind of the experiment, because if you don't know, TRICARE is
Is it your Medicaid?
it's
VA. It's the VA,
it's the
Medicaid.
village care for the military.
Yeah.
So I just feel like that would kind of be like an initial jump off
That's
point to
interesting.
kind of test it
Well,
within the TRICARE system.
And I think in Medicare, it's been tried in the Medicare system in a couple of states, or workers' comp.
Workers'
excuse
comp.
me, is
So
what
I
was
think
calling
workers'
it.
comp
It
is
is
probably
workers' comp.
for the state
Nice.
level where we're gonna see, like, where we're learning a lot of lessons, right? But it's funny because the barriers that we're gonna have for integration into healthcare are really boring, actually, and they're not that hard. And they're things like standardizing terminology. Right.
ICD-10 codes.
That's not boring.
She loves that. But that is like one of the things that we're working on at American for Safe Access is that we're going to put out in the same way that when we partnered with the American Herbal Products Association and put out recommendations to regulators for regulating cannabis for human consumption. We're going to be doing that for federal agencies of how to integrate cannabis into healthcare. And part of that is like figuring out shelf life of cannabinoids, right? Like you want to include all of these things, and it's and honestly, the fun thing about regulations, yes, I just said that sentence, but the fun thing about regulations is that you just have to write them down to get started, and they may suck the first version, but the very first regulations that happened in medical cannabis was when I was watching these raids happen, and I was talking to the 11 dispensaries. And I was like, we got to get the cities at least behind you, because these were illegal at the city level, state level, federal level. I was like, because right now you guys just look like arrogant drug dealers. People are coming here with a lot of weed and they're leaving. I was like, let's tell them how we're regulated. And they were like, we don't want any regulations. It's like, okay, you guys have regulations. And they're just like, can anybody come in here? And they're like, no, they have to be a patient. I was like, patient? Like, how do you know they're a patient? Well, they bring in a letter from their doctor. It's like, how do you know it's from their doctor? Well, we call, we look it up this way. I was like, okay. I was like, are you guys open 24 hours? They're like, no, right. We have security. And I was like, okay. And that was the first regulations for cannabis, right? And so the same thing is going to be true for terminology. Like, of course, we can improve it as we go, but you just have to write it down. And so you're at least arguing over the same thing. Like people need to stop just being like, no, I'm creating a standard. No, I'm creating a standard. You're like, okay, your standards can't talk. Like,
Yeah, and you know, it's a standards-based future. Standards not only for laboratory testing, standards for product quality. I mean, I think we are, you know, and it's important as a medicine. You know, you want to have the same predictable kind of experience, especially when you're dialing into really specific diseases and health conditions that were, you know, really require download medicine. So we have a few more minutes, and we each have maybe one question each. So I'm gonna let each one of y'all pick a top question of yours.
Well, so most of these were already answered.
Okay,
so
great.
I feel confident with that. But there was somebody here online that had a question about what does it mean for personal growth? Does it mean that we won't be able to grow our own medicine anymore?
That's a great question.
It's a
So
question.
what does it mean for personal growth?
yeah. So there's the order does not cover everything. I'll say that, but we can kind of stitch together what it did and didn't say. And on its face, it says that it's trusting the states to regulate things. The most, and when I say most, I mean like 99.999% of cannabis possession and personal cultivation charges happen at the state level. It is like unless they just want to toss it on to some other crime, but this is not somewhere that the federal government is charging. You're not going to have like DEA just stumble on your house and be like, I think you're growing weed. So it's local police, so you don't need anything additionally, right? Like it is the whatever the state says, like that's your protection. You don't need something else.
There was one more real quick.
But there's one but to that.
Okay.
Is you can't try to assert federal rights for that, right? So if you're growing 400 plants and you're like, oh, this is federally legal, no, you gotta follow what the state is saying, and that's the protection.
So for example, patients are allowed to have six seedlings and six flowers. So that is the limit that we would be able to
Exactly.
continue to
So
still
6
have.
Yes.
Yeah, and none of that changes.
And then
And if you hear people giving people
Unless
other
the state
advice,
changes it.
stop it.
what do you think of people needing to save their dispensary seeds for medical tax expenses?
Keep their seeds.
Receipts.
Oh, receipts.
Uh-huh.
That's a very good
Sorry,
one.
I'm not a
What do I think about people saving their receipts? Yes. Because the other thing that the order said to the Treasury is that there's a potential that they could give back relief.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're definitely, before we started creating the commercial cannabis programs, like when we, part of like our regulations for the first generation of medical cannabis businesses was like keep things on spreadsheet, but we also were like, and get a big metal magnet, and when a cop is at the door, like wipe it, right? Like that was that time. But yeah, absolutely. And I think and for individuals, as far as their receipts go, yeah, I mean, I think that there is that we're in a moment of evolution, right? And a lot of what's fun about evolution is that our interpretation is as true as anyone else's. Sometimes people with guns get their way, but I mean, you guys think about how cool the thing is we just pulled off. It's like civil disobedience is the wrong word. I'm trying to think of a new word for this because the philosophy of civil disobedience is that you are committing a crime, right? Because there's a greater crime happening. But in the spirit of nonviolent civil disobedience, you stay and you do the time for the crime, right? That's not what we did. So somehow we figured out how we got people in 40 states to be a part of this civil disobedience. I mean, it's civil, right? For sure. It's disobedience. And in the early days, they were going to jail. But we're not, like, no one's going to jail. Like, we figured out how to show the country, like, we can regulate this. We can do this. This can be done. Right? And so I think that the way that you need to think about this moment in time is think about what would happen when we first started Americans for Safe Access if we looked at the DEA's rescheduling denial and we're like, yeah, the federal government should create product safety protocols. Or the federal government should change the UN drug treaties, right? So like if there's a gap, we have to fill it, right? Like it's us, like this next piece. So this can be amazing, right? Or it could end up with a couple companies taking it over. It's not going to be. I mean, we're not going to see big pharma come take this over. I just really want people to understand that concept is that there's not enough patentability for this to be an investment that's worthwhile. They would be required to go through the FDA, the drug approval process, and it just doesn't work.
And I think there's a lot of confusion around that.
There's so much, like
a lot of confusion.
Yeah,
And-
because of course we've heard, oh, Philip Morris is gonna come back and take over.
Yeah, the
And
alcohol.
they want nothing
Something like that.
to do with this. They
Yeah.
already make tons of money.
Yeah, and I think the pharmaceutical industry is really into that. The pharmaceutical model for research doesn't fit the entourage effect
Yes.
of the multi-cannabinoid synergistic
it's just too expensive.
model.
It's
And
too expensive, and it's in the United States. I think people often. I don't mean to take off.
no,
But I was gonna say, in the United States, people like they often confuse conspiracy and capitalism, right? Where they're like,
Yeah.
and the pharmaceutical companies, I was like, they're called for-profit companies.
Right.
It's not a conspiracy. Like there's nothing like that is not like they're a company
Yeah.
to make profit, and they make more money when you're sick. They're not right. They're like they make a lot of money from polypharmacy, right? So I think that what is going to help us get from where we are right now to where we want to be is to be really clear where you want to be, right? And that that may not always be hand in hand with other stakeholders, right? And I think that this is an important time for the patient voice. Not medical professionals speaking on your behalf of when you should get it. You should come see them every month, right? Like, medical professionals love Schedule II drugs. They love having those those
I
appointments.
wouldn't say all of us.
Not all of them, but I'm saying that your associations do. And the same thing for cannabis businesses, right? Like, it doesn't mean that they're our enemy or whatever, but like they're speaking on your behalf all the time, and this is the time of the patient. This is their jobs are their businesses. All of it is to serve us, and we have to step up and tell them what that looks like, right? Or else we're going to end up with I don't even know. I've seen some scary iterations of that. But I also I know that a lot of times people live in the cannabis bubble, and probably less so in Oklahoma. But there's a big backlash happening against cannabis in Washington, D.C.,
yeah.
right? And
On other stuff.
the fluffiness that we had like 5 years ago, where everybody was like all excited about doing something about cannabis, it is gone.
Oh, yeah.
The will has been worn out, and it's between adult use, not educating communities, and the hemp. Well, I think and hemp being tied in with vaping and all of that. I think the parents are really scared about. Yeah. That like we can't assume that we get to keep this, right? So we have to be like, there are a lot of us who have worked really hard to get to right here, and there are a lot of people who didn't make it here that I worked really hard with. It's been their last moments on this earth, sitting in courtrooms, going to meet with city council members, legislators, that like we got here for them. And so just know that this is precious, that this is it's ours, we own it, but like you didn't rent this car, this is yours, right? Like it's time to like detail it, clean it with a diaper, whatever you gotta do. But and just know that this isn't going to just happen by itself. Like this is not the time to sit back, relax, like you need to double down, which I know that may sound exhausting to a lot of you, but like this is it. Like, and there's over 6 million of us in this country,
Yeah.
right? Like need to activate those people. And so get off of online, like, I know we're online right now, but like, but we have a lot of posters and things, like, get back to community organizing. We created all of these posters. You can print from home. I designed them so it won't need up all your ink and somebody yell at you.
We'll have
Tell
some
them
links.
the website to go to.
safeaccessnow.org.
Okay, safeaccessnow.org, guys.
And yeah, we're gonna take a little step and see if anybody in our audience would like to have any comments or questions. Just think about it now. We'll open it up, but and then I think if you all have one question you might want to ask, we got about maybe 10 more minutes.
Mine have already been answered, but I will tell you my kind of topic was what federal changes mean for Oklahoma businesses. And I can kind of tell you the biggest hurdle that we as businesses have faced thus far, besides the conflicting instructions by our licensing authorities, but we're going to set that aside for now, is that we are having issues submitting on the portal for grow licenses and distribution licenses. And so that's why I was when are you going to do that video? Because I think that is what our Oklahoma business owners are going to get the most benefit from immediately, is seeing how we can navigate through that portal, because we're hearing, oh, you can check manufacturer and then you put these drug codes in, but then the distributor's not going through and all of those things. And so that is adding to the anxiety. And I think that sometimes these business owners are going to go, well, I've tried it 6 times, I'm not trying it again, I'm done and I'm out. Whereas if you can show them that it's 4 different clicks, then that may.
I'm happy to do that. And some of it is, I mean, part of the frustration is that not all of it's up. The DEA has changed their mind once about which one they want to do, and part of it is staying in compliance with USC 811D. Like if they created something new, they're like, oh, right, they've got to pull that back and put it in this other licensing. And so, yes, I'm happy to put that out, but people need to think about this like taxes. Like if you can't get a button to work to pay your taxes, the IRS isn't like, okay, next year, right? It's your responsibility to get that in. And if I could just address the information you're getting from the 2 agencies here in Oklahoma. I mean, my grandpa taught me always listen to people with guns. I'm just kidding, but it is kind of a good rule.
It's a good rule.
It is a good rule of thumb.
No, but they're actually both right, and I say. And so the way that they are both right is you don't have to. Like, you don't have to. You also don't have to own a dispensary, right? Which is like, I feel like OMA, or I shouldn't say this. I would say like not all regulators want there to be everybody having them, right? And so maybe it's okay to be like, you don't have to.
Right.
So they are correct that you don't have to. If you want to have federal protections, right, the way the order has said, you have to have the DEA registration, right? What is unclear is like, when people are like, well, I'll still get protections under CJS appropriations, right? If you guys know, what that is, right? So the only reason the feds haven't been raiding you this whole time, since 2014, is that we passed a rider to the Department of Justice's budget that says that they can't use any money that they get from Congress to interrupt the state medical cannabis programs. So that's why the raids have stopped. But we have to pass it every year, right? And it's horrible policy. And again, that's another thing. It's like we thought it was going to be triage. But right now, the anti-cannabis movement, they've been adding riders onto our rider, which is really annoying. And for the last 2 Congresses or 2 sessions, they've passed a rider to the rider that says that they can't use medical cannabis or money to go after medical cannabis. But they said, except for if they're in violation of USC 860, which is the drug-free zones. But unlike the language that we put in your legislation here in the state of California, that's just 1,000 feet from schools, USC 860 is 1,000 feet from all schools. So elementary school, preschools, daycare, 1,000 feet from junior colleges, even ag schools, from also swimming pools, arcades, which were in the 80s, and there's a couple others. So basically it's a map, and if you're in violation of USC 860, it's double the fine, double the jail time. So on paper, if you're running a dispensary, it's about 40-year mandatory minimum, because like you add up all of the charges. So if that dispensary is near one of those places, it's 80 years. And so there, you really cannot draw a map unless you are out in Dale, unless you're out in the middle of nowhere, that you could even have a business, right? And so I would just say that, like, you cannot assume that anything stays the same, right? Like they are now creating rules that also require enforcement. And if you read the order, which is only 33 pages, and if your livelihood and your freedom are associated with a document that's 33 pages, you should read it. I would just say that. I think that. But they mentioned in the International Drug Treaties, Article 28, right, which is like how businesses need to be regulated. The other major part of the UN drug treaties is that, like, here's how you can regulate drugs so that people who need them have access to them. The other side of that is Article 33, which says you have to enforce everything else. And the Attorney General, his order that just came out, it's giving us all these freedoms, specifically cites Article 33. So I just would not assume that they're going to give somebody a license and then it's like, and everybody else can do what they want. And then the final part of that is that when things get legal, it's not considered snitch culture, right? To like be like, well, I'm following the rules, right? And there's companies that are joining the NASDAQ right now. Do you think they're going to just allow like other people to break these laws? So I'm just saying, the world is changing.
Yeah.
I said the world is changing in like a lot of words.
The world is changing. Katie, if you had
When it comes to patients having open dialogue with their providers, and healthcare workers work for many different companies, they all have different rules and regulations. How do you advise healthcare providers who says you can't talk about that because you don't support it, but you have a duty to protect and educate patients?
So I would say there. In case I'm around me enough, you know that I create a one-pager presentation and a booklet for everything. But I would say for if that education is patient-driven, we have a one-pager on our website under patient resources that is talking to your medical professional. That is just a simple letter that's like, this is not an illegal conversation, right? It's literally like, you are not like, here we passed a federal law for you, right? Like you already have protections under the First Amendment, but now you have these protections, like totally legal for me to talk to you about this. And then we also have something else that you print for them that's just for the doctor. That's like, your patients are using cannabis. Straight up, like, you need to know what happens because it affects a lot of systems in their body. And if you're going to operate on them, if you're going to give them any other treatment, you need to know. The second thing I would say is that we've also, under patient resources, you can find the same letter that you can give to your landlord, your employer, your hospital, your hospice, your apartment building. You can also, it's for medical professionals, that it's literally like, my medicine, this is what I'm taking, it is legal, how are you going to accommodate me? And I think that what I'm hoping is that we also, now's the time to really think about integration of cannabis into our society. And this is what I think may be the hardest for a lot of people in the cannabis space that love subcultures. Right? And somebody said to me once on a panel, they're like, well, what are you going to tell, people, you don't want people like us to I don't know, have cannabis. I'm like, well, what do you want me to say to like people that don't look like you that want medicine, right? Like we are now like this is now medicine, not like medicine. I think that we should also, just on a side, we should be able to karate chop anyone in the throat that does this when they say our medicine, right? Just like,
or medical program.
like automatic, just like, whoo, do it twice, it's over. No.
All cannabis use is medicinal cannabis use.
So,
You know,
do not karate chop people, but there is going to be a lot of, there's a lot of people who have made a little bit of money around cannabis, where they're like going to create this specialty, whatever. And a lot of, people make a little bit of money and then their business fails. There's like, how many people here know people that have started a cannabis business? How many people here know someone who have a bankrupted cannabis business? Exactly, right? So, but instead of thinking of like creating this specialty component, now's the time to bring cannabis into X, and you're the expert, right? And so right now, you've got all these, and again, we have to make sure that people are demanding this, right? Because in the United States, you don't have rights unless you exercise them, right? If you get arrested and you're just talking away to a cop, yes, you have the right to shut up. But if you don't have that right. You waive that right. The same is true if your employer asks you about your medical condition and you tell them, you've waived your protections under those rights, right? So we really have to educate patients about demanding these rights, because as soon as a doctor has 20 patients come in, or a hospice is like, hell, right? Then they are going to take the time to educate themselves about how to integrate cannabis into their practice, right? Just use the word "sue" around the doctor. And they're like, okay.
Awesome. Well, did we have a question in the audience?
I have one thing left.
Seeing none, we have one. Our last question.
When we talked earlier about like testing standards and things like that, I think one of the things that for me, and you know some of my journey, is that expanding the pesticide testing requirements in the state of Oklahoma, and that's because we're one of the states where we test literally 13 pesticide analytes, and there are other states who test 66 to 106. So what do you foresee coming in the future to kind of see a federal framework of testing standardization or standards required?
So I think that the cannabis, this is going to be a little controversial. I think that the cannabis product safety protocols are over dependent on laboratories for product safety. And so I think that what we have not been utilizing are like so in agriculture, every state has USDA staff, they're jointly paid staff, and they actually go around the farms all the time, right? And they're there looking at going into the soil. They're testing the soil, right? They are looking at cans. They're looking at labels of things that are going on. So a lot of people may not understand how testing works, but there is not a test for pesticides. They're just like, does this have pesticides, right? You actually have to ask it, does it have this pesticide, right? So like, and a lot of people just don't, like, it's like, why would you know that unless you're working in this field? But the same thing is, you can't just ask it, like, tell me what cannabinoids are in here. You have to ask it each one, right? Or terpenes. And so the more things you're asking something, it is expensive. So, and there are over 400 types of pesticides that are approved through USDA in this country, right? Organics, I don't want to talk about that, whether that no, I should be quiet. Because we're legal now, we're working with these agencies. But I think that what we need to be looking at, instead of, again, focusing in on making every state test more pesticides, right? I think that we need to have a strategy that's in the short end, which is like definitely improve the testing. But what we need to do is just take advantage of the staff that already exists in every one of our states, that are USDA staff, and have them do upstream inspections, right?
Yeah.
Because if they, basically what they'll do is if they see a pesticide that you're not supposed to have, right? They will basically say, this crop can't go anywhere until we see we'll test the plants that come out of here. And if they don't have residual, or if it's not there, then you can sell them. But you're not going to sell them first, right? And make us recall them. And so, and look, I just want to be fair to regulators in this one thing, right? We have asked our cannabis regulators to be the FDA, the USDA, OSHA, I mean, everything. They don't do this
Public health.
for
Public
everything.
safety,
And so,
enforcement. all sorts of
yes, there are a
things.
lot of things that can be annoying, but they're doing a lot and have done a lot, and we've learned a lot because of them.
Absolutely.
And what I hope that we get to keep from our state experiment is, again, a lot of the state-by-state testing, because we can actually, because if you're testing agriculture the way we are with all these data points, you can actually predict when funguses are coming into an area. You can actually create the old almanacs, the way that our great grandparents used to farm. They'd be like, there's gonna be mold, right? They could use less pesticides because they knew what these endpoints meant. And this could change the need for pesticides, right? So I would say, back to your question, which I think is a very random tangent there, is that in the short term, I think that you should ask this question instead of pointing something, which is how is the agency going to say that this cannabis is safe? Because the tools are all there, right, for them to do that, and know that they're under federal scrutiny now, right? And so the one thing that I do want to be wary of as we move forward with all these regulations, that's why I want to be very careful about how FDA gets involved with cannabis, is that I don't want the FDA recall program for drugs. Do you guys know what at least 11 people have to die before they even look at it? And it's a part of it is, they're afraid of getting sued right there. I mean, because it's expensive. There's company issues, right? I was just talking to a reporter. It was telling me wow, someone reported that they thought that this product was contaminated, and it took the agency 8 months to do a recall. And I'm like, that's pretty fast. And what is also the thing that I don't want to change in cannabis is the variety, right? So you're not when Heinz is making ketchup, it's the same ketchup every time. So the temperature in the room, right? Everything is the same. For cannabis with lots of different varieties, right? Not all of those testing protocols are going to be the same. And so we just have to be careful what we wish for. But also, we just need to make sure that we're keeping this as close to the plant as possible, right? Because we are going to break through this this stump in Western medicine, right? That makes people want to put everything in a synthesized pill. And there's a lot of money involved. I think that we're going to see drug testing companies. They are one of our biggest opponents in DC. You guys should see their presentations. But they're even though cannabis is legal, you still should drug test people. But think about everyone that makes money along that supply chain, right? The people who make trays for prisons, they all get involved. But I think we should think about and be able to talk about the money that medical cannabis brings to our society that isn't taxes. Right? So me not being in a hospital, you not being in a
Quality
hospital,
of life.
I can work.
Yeah.
Right? All of those things have costs. So just don't
Direct costs.
don't let someone tell you that taxes are the only way that a society makes money off of cannabis.
Right.
Thank you so much. This
Thank
has
you for
been
having me.
really amazing. Thank you all.
And we've been baking a cake.
And we have, yeah.
Thank you everybody for coming here.
Holy
And
smokes,
thank you everybody joining online. And really appreciate everybody on the panel. And thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
All right, you ready? You can take
Any
us
questions
out.
for Marshall?
Okay,
I'm Susan Connie Johnson.